Officer, and I'll call to order our meeting for today, April 9th, 2008. There's been an agenda prepared for today, and the intention is to go through the agenda in the order the projects are shown, although there could be a reason to reorder them depending on events and people. But generally speaking, we follow that order. And I want to begin by just reading a notice. We have a notice on every agenda regarding the television broadcast of our meetings, but we have new information about the television broadcast. This regular meeting of the Staff Hearing Officer will be broadcast live on City Channel 18 and on, this is the new part, and on the computer via the website www.santabarbaraca.gov/government-video. And then you follow some directions to get to the live broadcast. City TV 18 will also rebroadcast the meeting in its entirety on Friday at 1 p.m. An archived copy video of this meeting will be available on computers with high-speed internet access the following Monday after the meeting. So just in case anyone's interested in our record, it's now much more available in terms of the internet. Okay, the first item is to request whether or not there are any changes to today's agenda. I'm aware of none.
There are none.
Okay. Do we have any announcements regarding new appeals?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. This is the general public comment period. Would anyone like to make a general public comment? It's not on one of the projects, just regarding the Staff Hearing Officer. Okay. Project A on Junipero Street. We'll begin, if the applicant would like to come up, we'll begin with a brief report from Ms. Milazzo.
Thank you. Ms. Weiss. Project site is 7,800 square feet, zoned E1, currently developed with a single-family residence. Garage here with access off of Junipero Street. Proposed project involves about 250 square feet of new floor area, a major remodel, which involves either the removal, replacement, or exchange of windows and doors on this non-conforming wall. Current setback is 10 feet for all new additions and alterations. The existing house sits, 6? Correct. So a modification is required in order to allow the alterations in that wall. It is staff's position that the alterations being proposed are just necessary to secure the appropriate improvement of remodel and upgrade to the older home. The number of openings does not change. It's actually going to be reduced, and we support this modification as it's submitted.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't have any questions. If you'd like to identify yourself.
My name is Akiko Wade Davis. I'm representing Kent Nixon Architect.
Okay, great. Do you feel the need to add anything else to?
I can just talk through really briefly. The changes in the windows are based on the bedroom reconfigurations, and we're actually removing one window and wanting to change one door to a window. So, as Roxanne described it before.
And I think I have a question. I've asked this before. I just need to remember. Is the way that the code is written and applied, couldn't we just sum total all the openings, and if it's less, they wouldn't have needed the mod?
I would love to. We currently don't practice that.
Okay.
Way or that philosophy.
Okay.
But this makes sense. This is actually reducing the number and size of window openings on that side.
Okay. All right. We'll have a public hearing on this project. Is anyone here for the Junipero Street window alteration? Okay, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Okay, I concur with the staff recommendation, make the findings, and approve your modification today. All decisions of the Staff Hearing Officer are appealable to the Planning Commission. There's a 10 calendar day appeal period. And the Planning Commission also reviews the actions, and if there's any need they feel to have a broader full commission discussion, then they bring it up to their commission.
Okay.
That's only happened once.
Okay.
But it's the same 10-day appeal period, and so if anything were to happen, Roxanne would be in touch with you.
Okay, great.
Actually, I did receive a letter just being handed to me now from Paula Westbury. She monitors all the development agendas here and is often very concerned about alterations that change old buildings. So that's her comments. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next project is the Garcia Road project. The applicant like to come up? We'll begin with a brief report from Ms. Milazzo.
Thank you again. This project site is about 9,500 square feet, also zoned E1, currently developed with a single-family residence on Garcia Road, access here to an existing two-car garage. The proposed project involves demolition and replacement of the substandard garage with a couple alterations. It currently has this little recessed wall configuration here in the front of the garage. On the rebuild, they are proposing to fill those spaces in. They're also asking to provide storage onto the garage for necessary storage purposes and to enclose over here utilities. The modification being requested is the discretionary application being requested is a modification to allow reduction of the existing non-conforming open yard. The existing open yard, which needs to be behind the house in a flat area with minimum dimensions of at least 20 feet in all directions and totaling at least 1,250 square feet, is not currently being provided. But as you can see in the area being shown hatched here on the site plan, although these areas are raised and patio and terrace, which don't allow them to qualify as the open yard per the ordinance, it provides the amount that's required. Also considered is the fact that this upper level deck, providing another almost 350 square feet of outdoor amenities for the enjoyment of the yard. So staff is requesting approval of this modification by making the findings that open yard in adequate amounts and locations for private outdoor enjoyment of the occupants is being provided on this site.
Thank you, Ms. Milazzo. I did have a question regarding this area. And it may be for you or for the applicant. But first for staff, so this dimension is at least 20 feet.
Correct.
And then this dimension is at least 20. So they meet that dimensional 20-foot. The little different areas of small retaining walls and patio platforms, those small cut amounts make this not eligible?
Because of the changes in the elevation in that overall area, they constitute obstructions in the open yard area.
Okay. Now that is something that has been reviewed as a change to the city's ordinance by the ordinance committee, where the slope of an area wouldn't be particularly these were minor changes in slope. I think the overall slope back here is clearly less than 20%.
But the obstructions themselves are over 10 inches.
Oh, obstructions in the open yard. So it's more of the features of the yard versus the slope?
In this particular case, they didn't provide an area that qualified for open yard based on the ordinance definitions.
Mr. Durden has an additional comment?
Yes, the amendments we are proposing that went before the ordinance committee would allow areas over 20% slope to count towards the open yard area. And then also we're proposing to allow decks less than 36 inches in height to count towards the open yard area.
So in this case, again, this is less than 20% already. My view of it the other day.
Right, yeah.
But these obstructions, as decks or little walls, if they're less than 3 feet, then
they would count.
This would probably count in the future.
That would be our opinion.
Okay. That's a good starting point. Now, the question for the applicant, I don't know. I just received it this afternoon, and I forgot to bring it down. Maybe.
I have a copy.
I visited the site, and I spoke to a resident, I think owner, of your property, and we talked about this wall at the back. So what I'm not quite clear on is this dimension of the open yard, I think includes moving of the fence. So I want you to address the moving of the fence question. Okay, that concludes my questions so far. Okay, to the applicant?
Sure. You want me just to address just the fence?
First your name and then whatever you'd like.
Greg Reck from Architects
Okay.
West.
Thank you.
And this is Tim Peoples, one of the owners of the property. First of all, the garage is in the location that it is because we are attempting to replace in kind the garage portion. And it's also because of the deck area here. We've got to center the garage doors in between that column that exists back there. When we submitted this, the idea is that currently there is a fence that runs about 5.5 feet in from the rear property line on both sides of the garage out to the side property lines. And when we had submitted this, the plan was to move the fence back to the property line. However, there's two neighbors here that Tim and Sue have talked to about the project here, and I believe that there is a shed located in this area here, and there is a carport, which is probably clear, but is maybe right up to the back property line on the other property that abuts. And so what we would like to do is to maintain that fence in the same location, either replace it or repair it when the construction is done on the garage. And even if we keep the fence in the same location, we've got between this area here and the deck that Roxanne pointed out in her staff report, we still have over 1,250 square feet of open yard area. So it's the applicant's favor to keep the fence where it is in order to keep the neighbors happy.
Okay. Did you want to present anything else?
Just the fact that there's a window in the back of the existing garage that we are removing so that we're not peering down into someone's backyard. We've got this new storage area over here that's being added, and that is all within the setback. And I think it's just going to make for a better project overall. The garage right now is just currently not used because of the existing structure. It's old. It's got wood footings that are sitting directly on grade or on sandstone. And the previous owners did not park their cars in the garage because they were afraid that it might collapse with the load of the car in there. And so the Peoples are basically doing the same thing, not using the garage, and therefore the replacement is important to them.
Okay. The configuration of the site with the deck in relation to the garage is awkward. I think this is where people may be parking from time to time. At least here's an example of in your photos that this. I was just curious if anyone had thought about, not just doing a larger one-car garage with storage and having this count as one covered space and that count as another covered space, and then you don't even need this as large a structure. I mean, this is just such an oddity. If the way to get into this space is to drive through here, you could just stop and park there. And as far as I can tell, this might even count as a covered parking space.
It may. I mean, I didn't look at the height below the deck there, whether that's up to code or anything like that for a room. But I think
for a covered parking space, it's a carport in effect.
Yeah, but I think the intention here is to really replace the garage in kind, and that's what the Peoples would like to do. And then there was this other additional area here where we've got an existing meter and panel and other equipment that hangs off the existing wall.
Right, I have no problem with that. Oh, I see.
If we didn't build that, then we get back into the replacement costs of having to move that meter and main panel for the entire property.
Okay. I was just coming at this from a standpoint of trying not to reduce the open yard area, and reduce the footprint of buildings is one way to reduce the amount of yard and land that's occupied. So this storage room over here, I think from staff standpoint, that's also technically the reduction in open yard. Since the site as a whole doesn't have the required open yard, this is considered an encroachment into the open yard. But really, this area is approximately the exact amount. It's just the design of it. I'd like a comment from staff on if someone's property has 1250, but they fence off 5 feet of it. I mean, that doesn't require a mod. The property itself still meets the 1250, even if the land is being enjoyed by someone else. Yeah. I don't know how often we see that, but it seems to me to be technically correct.
Okay.
You have a
but we
comment
can
on
take
that?
the position that the fence eliminates the enjoyment of the space.
For its intended purpose.
Yeah, normally that
But
would...
even if you talk about non-contiguous open yard area over here, then let's take a look at
Right.
that, because even if we keep the fence in the same spot and we count this space and this space, we are still above
Well,
1250.
this space doesn't meet the requirement of an open
No,
yard.
it's-
We're saying it meets the intent of the open yard, and that helps the modification case. But it doesn't qualify for code technically, that's why you're here. And since you are requesting a modification, that could be grounds for us looking at the fence differently than we might technically. But why I might be on the fence is they could, in a matter of months, hopefully, if everything stays on track, actually be in compliance with the open yard. If that ordinance
ordinance
gets adopted.
Yeah, with the fence moving or no?
No, without the fence moving. The fence
You can have a fence in your open yard.
in your open yard.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so, okay. Well, there are some people who want to speak on this too, so I'm going to open the public hearing. The first speaker is Matthew Kelly. Like to come up, and you can sit right here and share this microphone. Swing the microphone. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Please. My name is Matthew Kelly. I live below the applicant's property at 931 East Carrillo Road with my wife. And I believe what we have here is neighbors working together, which is good. The Peoples have been very upfront with what they want to do. Our request and our goal is that they keep the fence in the same location that it is, because that fence actually is a continuous line going across several properties on that hill. I don't mind them rebuilding their garage, even within the setback. I think that's an important thing where we live. I've done it. My hope is that you allow them to rebuild the fence where it is and not, and I've also sent in a letter, as you can see, and so has my other neighbor, regarding what changes it would take in our yard. There happens to be a retaining wall that's sandstone. It's been there a long time. We'd like to not have to tear out that retaining sandstone wall, come down to our property, rebuild one, and fill it. So I support their application for a modification, but on the condition that we all come together and allow them to keep the fence in the same location. That is my comment.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer? Thank you.
Okay. Kenneth Hirschberg.
I'm Kenneth Hirschberg. Myself and my wife live at 929 East Carrillo Road, directly below the Peoples. I'll just echo Matt Kelly's remarks that, yes, I support their plans, especially with the fence remaining where it is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else here would like to address, be part of the public hearing? Okay, I'll close the public hearing.
I think these copies are for you.
Actually, Mr. Kelly, did you say you turned in a letter?
Yes, I turned in a letter yesterday.
Oh, okay.
They put it on the computer.
It's funny, this is Hirschberg. I just don't see the Kelly letter.
They came in yesterday. They handed it up to him.
Okay,
I thought I sent it upstairs, though.
okay. Well, just a note to the
Sure.
file.
The letter right here.
Okay, yeah,
Thank you.
that would be good, just so our file's complete. Okay,
Here you go.
so even though,
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
oh, it's interesting the way the signatures are at the
Format,
bottom. It almost
uh-huh.
looks, but it's different, so, okay. What was I going to say? You want me to say yes? Okay, I can just say yes and get it over with, but there was something more important I was going to say first. I'm sure it was going to be very profound. Okay. Request for an open yard modification. Oh, your application, I think, noted somewhere that the fence was to be relocated.
It did.
So are you now expressing that you're amending your
Yes.
request and propose not to relocate the fence?
Correct.
Okay, thanks. I just want to be sure that the record shows that the applicant is no longer proposing to relocate the fence.
Looking on the plans, please.
Yes, so, okay, I'll get to that. Then the question is, to me, as to whether or not I think that's important enough that I would take a different position, to modify your request. And given your neighbor's concern and that the cumulative total of usable area is in excess of 1250, I won't make that a special condition. So approve the modification for the open yard as requested and amended such that the existing fence may be replaced in essentially the same location, and that the plans submitted for building permit make clear your proposal. That doesn't mean that you can't change your mind at a future date. I mean, I'm not stating that the fence cannot be moved. I'm just stating that I'm approving your request as submitted and that you show it appropriately on the construction drawings. Okay, so that's an approval of the modification, and then all actions taken here today are appealable within 10 calendar days, and there's an oversight review by the Planning Commission, so if members of the Commission believe they should review the project, then you would go before them.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the next application is on Mira Vista, 1635 Mira Vista.
This project site is about 16,600 square feet, currently developed with a single-family residence, access off Mira Vista. Oops, I'm going to show you this side. Access off Mira Vista to a large paved area for accessing the required parking. The proposed project involves a major remodel of the house. No new square footage is being proposed as a part of this plan. However, reconfiguration of the existing driveway to come down here with access into the garage facing the street that will allow this whole area to be landscaped, which will be a major improvement over the span of concrete that currently exists. In order to make this maneuver and have the back out, it is required that a retaining wall be installed along here. At some points, the retaining wall plus the 3.5-foot high hedge that's proposed above it, which from the street will be the only thing that's visible, is going to exceed the maximum allowable accumulative height of 8. It may go as high as 13, maybe 13.5. So the applicant is asking for a modification to allow a wall in excess of 8 feet along the first 10 feet and along the driveway for the first 20 feet back. Staff is recommending approval of this project in that it secures an appropriate improvement of improved aesthetic situation over the current, the fact that only the hedge is going to be visible, and due to the difference in grade, the property probably sits about 8 feet lower than Mira Vista, which is a private road above.
Thank you, Ms. Meleza. Again, I have one or two questions for staff and or the applicant. So in the new garage configuration, would this car be able to go maneuver out like that? And would this car be able to do a similar, or is this space over here somehow needed for maneuverability? Okay.
I can answer it. Bill Wolf with Pacific Architects,
Okay.
and Michael Milhon, the owner. Yes, we actually provided a 24-foot backup distance, which meets the city standards in terms of backup dimension, and then to pull out through here.
Okay.
The idea of this was actually, we thought if there was the need for some reason to back into here, we could use that as well. It's not a critical element. We also thought it would create kind of a nice little area to actually create a little entrance down off of that from a higher level. If you come down to this lower portion, it's a little steeper, and then you walk down through this path. So we thought maybe this could be a passage from somebody coming from the street down into this section here. So that's why we kind of broke that out.
Yeah, it's very steep. Excuse me, Michael Mill. It's very steep through here. Visitors walking you end up, tiptoeing down. So.
But we do have enough backup dimension.
I was kind of torn in looking at the neighborhood, and I know that parking is a concern in every neighborhood, but particularly different parts of the Riviera where the streets are narrow and such. This end of the private lane, I think my observation was, at least the time of day I was there, that there weren't that many cars parked, and even when there were, you could get by. It's a slow-moving street. This looked like parking in the front yard to me, which is
Not allowed.
not allowed by the zoning. And so since I'm here to talk about zoning, that occurred to me. And just thinking about how I might direct the single-family board to study that a little bit more about whether or not it really makes sense to have that expansive paving and in that particular very visible front yard location.
Would it be your desires to remove that, I guess, would be the question. We could certainly, if that's a concern of yours, we would easily take that off. If,
a lot of people
and simplify the
in the world
whole-
park in their driveways. It's just a human
Sure,
fact
I
with all of us
do
that
that
have
too.
cars.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a balance between just being practical and knowing their needs, but then also with the zoning hat on going, wow, that looks
Right.
like a parking space
Sure.
right in the front yard.
Sure.
So my inclination was to ask, to just point it out to the design board, because
Okay.
one of the reasons why we don't like to see parking in the front yard is from a design and neighborhood compatibility concern. So they're the body really charged with that. So
Okay.
I thought. Secondly, the other area of question I had was the landscape material of the hedge. That was another thing that I thought the single-family board should address. I'd like to see the plant material be specced and planted with some species that generally doesn't grow a lot taller than 3.5 feet.
As you know, we've got,
Yeah.
right.
If you plant Eugenia there, boy, next thing you know, it's going to be 6 feet, 7 feet tall, and then we have a different zoning situation, much different than the one that you're here today. So I want your landscaping to be in sync with what we're all expecting, and that's a 3.5 foot height of landscaping. You're not requesting taller than that. So I'd like to have, again, that board and you all can talk about which species. I don't need to decide that.
Sure.
I'm just talking about the height. So those were the two areas of concern and question I had. And if you want to present any additional information, please do.
No, I think Roxanne did a wonderful job. We certainly will discuss with the review board the idea of that being removed, or if they're okay with it, we can certainly keep it, and we're definitely interested in keeping that low. I think that it helps the feel of this, which is, as you know, very covered with tall hedges along both sides of that lane, and his is the only one that doesn't have anything like that, and we're okay with it.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's the only one, but we've dealt with other properties where I think some people might be on notice to reduce some of those hedges. I'm not sure.
Some of those may be backyards, too.
On this side,
Yeah.
on this side of the street.
This side of the
But
street.
anybody along this street is a street, so it's technically a front yard.
Oh,
And I know, again, just the practical realities of people's desire for privacy, how plants grow, where cars end up being parked, sometimes isn't a problem for neighbors, but sometimes it is. Okay, is there anyone here regarding 1635 Mira Vista? I'll open and close the public hearing on this. Are there any additional comments from staff about the project or conditioning or anything? I think the minutes showed. Are you going back to the
I'm
full board?
sorry. We did receive one letter.
Okay.
I forgot to give this to you.
Thanks. So you're returning the single-family board. It doesn't say to consent or anything.
yeah, I didn't remember what we had left. I guess they can only do comments
Right.
before we can get the
Let's see.
modification, so, yeah.
Oh, it does say the project is ready for preliminary on consent. Well, I'm going to ask that you go before the board
Full board
instead of the
again.
consent, because I want them to look at the paving.
Okay.
That's probably more important. The landscaping
Than the
as well.
planting, right.
But that could be
Okay.
on consent,
Sure.
or at the full.
Yeah,
however
we'll
you
just
want to do it.
present them both.
Okay.
Yeah, that's an easy enough.
All right, so approve the modification as requested, making the findings contained in the staff report, which it said here already, said approval is subject to the condition that the hedge, I want to change that from hedge to landscaping.
Okay.
Just because I don't know if what gets put in will technically be a hedge. Above the proposed wall, maximum height 3.5 feet, and then that the project, and returning to the single-family board, pick appropriate landscape material, and to examine this as a potential parking in the front yard concern. And then they can work it out with you.
Yeah, decide whether they see it that way or not.
Reduce the paving a
Can we just
little bit.
modify that and avoid the issue entirely?
You might just squeeze off a little bit here.
There you go.
You know,
And
an effort to expedite to consent, could we take, well, you still would want them to review that?
But that
or
can go on consent. They'll just have a landscape person look at that.
if we just simplify that and actually cut it out, would,
I'd like to keep this part right
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Something along the lines of what I drew.
Would
something like
that be
Yeah.
acceptable to just go back to consent at that point? We'd be happy to.
Would you rather just go to consent?
I would, it's quicker, easier,
Okay,
you know.
all right. So the paving
We'll take the simpler path.
in the driveway is reduced as shown on the plan. And
Perfect.
then it's just the landscaping, pointing that out to the review. Either at preliminary or final, doesn't matter.
Okay,
Okay,
great.
thank
All
you.
right,
So
thank
this
you.
action is appealable within 10 calendar days, and the Planning Commission will have a review of this as well. They would have to make a
After that.
decision to pull it up. I don't think that's likely, but
Yeah.
Roxanne is your contact if there's any questions about
Okay.
next steps.
You're welcome.
Great, all right.
Okay, thank you.
Bye. Do you want to mention?
Oh, there was a letter on, did they get a copy?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, our next project is 108 Loma. Wait, Loma Maiden.
Correct. Project site is about 29,000 square feet, Zone D1 up on the Riviera. Steeply sloped property with an overall slope of approximately 43%. The proposed project involves a failing retaining wall located here. It needs to be replaced, and it will exceed heights of 8 feet within this front yard setback. The zoning ordinance allows a wall that's set back 10 feet from a front lot line to go up to a maximum height of 8 in the required yard. But this one, due to the amount of erosion and the area that needs to be retained, it's approximately 60 linear feet, may need to go as high as 12. So a modification is being requested to allow the installation of that wall for securing the soil behind it. Staff is recommending approval of this project by determining it's necessary to secure an appropriate improvement of preservation of the land on this lot, and is asking for an approval of those heights.
Thank you, Ms. Mazza. Hi.
Hi.
Would you like to identify yourself and add any information?
Yeah, I'm Mark Sauter with John Carter Incorporated. I'm a general contractor working with Wright Watling, the owner, who happens to be out of town today. A couple things I'd like to add was we had done this rendition, which
good.
unfortunately hadn't got to you guys. I've been working with Larry Cassidy in building, as well as I believe Brenda in planning. And it was emailed to Larry and was supposed to get forwarded to Brenda, and that didn't happen. So basically, what you've got would be, those are new pictures. This is existing condition.
I did get some photos.
Right, but what happened is then we put in the wall, if it
Oh,
was
my.
there, which is very. But then if you look at then with the passion vine, which is the existing condition, that's on an 8-foot tall existing railroad tie wall with a 4-foot tall fence on top of it. It actually carries that 12-foot all the way through, and our intent is, obviously
see the
not
one with the big
not
ugly
to have that ungodly, unsightly wall staring at everybody, but to
So
have
what's
it
this made out of?
concrete.
Well, so you're
It's
planting above and then it'll cascade over it?
Yeah, and actually, there's a couple ways to do it. The existing retaining wall with the chain link fence on top, they had planted above, and then the passion vine grew down over it and covered it completely. I am not much of a landscape person, so I prevailed on my mother to help me out, who went out to the site and basically, and that's what these other pictures show, is everything that's out there now we've listed here, and then this is my attempt at a landscaping plan, because I talked to 3 landscapers who couldn't, I met the 28th, and they couldn't get something put together by today. So with the rendition, this is where the wall would be, our take would be. Most of this is a lot of cascading rosemary, the passion vine, upright rosemary, a lot of bougainvillea, pinks, reds, and old fashions, I believe, some echium, some flax. So I was told by...
So would that be planted below the wall then? You maybe do it from both sides?
Both sides.
Yeah.
And then because it looks so awful in the interim...
Yeah, where is that awful picture?
Right here, maybe.
We were told to try to come up with a stucco color. We were thinking some sort of an earth tone. This is simply a temporary, just to, the owner's open to any other coloration if the board feels another color would be more appropriate. It's actually sort of interesting because the shale formation there is actually very white. But we felt more of an earth tone wouldn't stand out so much. And like I say, this is simply temporary until the whole thing can be planted over and covered completely.
I could certainly understand the physical need and the slope, and it's above a road. We don't want the slope falling down on a windy little road like that either, for public safety and all of that. I'm just a little surprised. I would think that the single-family board would really be working with you on the design of the wall. I mean, I know that it needs to be designed to meet a certain structural and engineering standard, but even so, can it be modulated? What materials you use? It's only concrete? I just kind of find that surprising that they're just saying, we'll just cover it with landscaping. What about looking at the wall itself, the construction of the wall, meeting certain engineering standards? I'm not asking that those be compromised, but...
We did look at that.
Yeah.
The first inclination, since the rest of it has a tiered look to it, was to try to put in 2 walls.
Okay.
There's just not room. There's no room. I've got another... we had an original topo done, and then they did a couple of sections for us, and you can see how steep both these areas are. And with the bench that we have to work with, there's just simply not enough room to put 2 walls in there. We've had Adam Simmons, a geologist, working with us, and Coast Valley Testing as the soils engineers who have done soils report. And structurally, we're actually going to have to drill down, so we're putting micropiles down and tiebacks in. If I can show you the structure of the wall if you want. And that's what it's going to take, because even with a 12-foot height, which I know is the issue here, being so close to the street, we are still going to end up just at the base of an existing retaining wall here, which we're just trying to keep in place and keep that from failing, which then would be right up against the house.
But can you show me in this section then where all these plants are going to be planted? I mean, there's room between these 2 walls.
We're going to end up, well, you'll just have below and above. So we're going to try to put the wall right here, which will just leave us probably about a 4 or 5 foot bench below, and the same at the top. And it varies actually on either end. It'll narrow to as little as maybe 2 feet. And then in the middle is the widest section where we could try to do the landscaping plan I was showing you to mitigate that. But because that was the hope and intent of the owner, myself, as someone that builds retaining walls, was to do a tiered system, because it just seemed like it would flow so much better. And because of the steepness, the shale, the way it's bedded,
And all the way the 60 feet across, there's no variation in this slope?
No, because it's all failed. I mean, if you look, probably...
How about that? What's that showing?
this is actually the bench itself, looking down from the top. So if the retaining wall goes in right here and comes up, and you can see, and this is the bottom of this wall here, and this is actually the top. This is the backyard, so to speak, at the level of the house. This is the top of that wall, which we're just trying to come to the bottom of that so the backyard doesn't give way and fail.
And again, there's not a lot of room for planting between these two walls.
Right. So I took a bunch of other pictures. And so really what we're trying to do is just restore this back to, I must have given you those already. So this is the rendition. Basically, we're trying to, and so I just took some more pictures of the hillside itself, and so you can obviously see the bougainvillea, the passion vine, upright rosemary.
Now, what's this passion vine growing on?
Currently, there's what you can't see because it completely covers it. And so that was really the saving grace we hoped to this project, was that we're continuing.
But isn't this in these kind of stepped blocks where there's dirt and things?
No.
What's it
This
growing?
is one of the, what you can't see is there's an old railroad tie retaining wall still left here, which is 8 feet high, and then there's a 4-foot chain link on top. So you have an 8-foot tall wall, grade, and then a 4-foot chain link, and the passion vine was planted here, and then grew through
the dirt somewhere
on the top. And in essence, we'll have the same thing once the retaining wall is built. We'll be able to backfill with soil to allow it to do the same thing.
So this project went to the single family board, and they said it's okay if it's screened with landscaping.
Right.
I just think this kind of detailed section and plots for your plants, giving a dimension of how much, how many gallon plants you can place in those areas, and having a landscape person who can attest that this is enough area and it'll grow to this height and these different things, because it feels to me like a bit of a leap of faith that it's going to. I see that this,
As
this
you
is
say, the
not the
proof sort of
same.
in the pudding, in that
But is
every
this the
plant,
same condition of the environment of your new wall?
It will be, absolutely.
So the same amount of dirt at the top?
Probably more
Here.
dirt will be behind the new retaining wall, because we can control that in the backfill. We obviously have to have drainage behind there so we don't build up hydrostatic pressure against the wall. But we can absolutely have a better condition.
Okay, I just thought you showed me where here the new wall came up and met the existing wall. So
Right,
that
what
doesn't feel like a lot of dirt.
Yeah, let me show you on a cross view, because what happens is the failure slopes back. So when you have a straight vertical wall come up, so basically the wall is straight, it's piles, tiebacks, and concrete. Well, the failure is like this.
So you can fill it with
So
dirt.
yeah, so we have that whole thing that will have to be backfilled once the wall is put in place.
Yeah, and so this backfill, it's going to meet this other retaining wall. So the slope of this backfill, where that other retaining wall starts. I mean, it could be a little tiny triangle, or it could be a big triangle. I don't know where the top retaining wall starts.
And I could put, the only other thing I could do is on the section, I could draw that in to show you exactly, So because basically it's going in right here. So you end up, with approximately 5 or 6 feet.
Okay. Because this is not a retaining wall?
No, that's the slope, that's the failure.
Where's the retaining wall?
The retaining wall would be put in.
I know the new
Right
one.
here.
I meant the existing one. Where's the
Oh,
existing?
okay. That's going to be, it's actually battered as well, because it's those concrete blocks that step back. So when you look at the picture again, you'll see those block concrete walls that are existing actually have a slope to them. And it just followed that all the way down where the two existing wood walls failed. I mean, overall, right now, we've got a height of about 18 or 19 vertical feet with the shale and that existing block wall on top of it.
Right, so here's the, yeah,
Can I ask a question?
sure.
What will be the distance from the top of the new wall, the proposed wall, to the bottom of the battered wall?
Yes, this here.
What's that distance going to be about?
It's going to vary. In the middle, we'll have the greatest distance, and I believe it to be about 5 to 6 feet.
Okay.
And then as this whole thing's on this radius following the curve of the road, as we get back to either end, that'll probably go down to just a couple of feet.
So between 2 and 5 feet of planting area.
Right.
Okay.
That's how much room you're going to have to plant all these plants that are going to come down over the.
Well,
over the wall.
I was going to just, I actually had switched it around, but we're amenable to anything, where I was going to put the cascading rosemary at the top, because they've actually done that with most of those existing, I don't know what the blocks, their gravity walls is always what I call them, because they're not structural, they're just stacked on top of each other.
Right. I think our concern is that is there going to be enough room at the top to plant these plants that will cover the
Absolutely.
And then at the bottom,
and at the wall and the bottom
enough, and what materials plants will grow fast or can be planted at a certain size already.
Right.
So when you return to the single-family board,
Now, what's the
you really need this section blown up to scale with plant materials and size and have.
Okay. What do you know what the time? In other words, the city of Santa Barbara, unlike the county, doesn't have an allowance for an emergency permit. I've already been given a permit by the building department. This is a safety issue for both the house and the road, as you talked about. So I don't know, and I'm sorry, but I'm ignorant of some of your processes, because usually I just work with building. We've been doing everything we thought was asked of us to expedite this and get it accomplished as soon as possible for everyone concerned. And I'll do anything else you want that you think will help make this go through.
Yeah.
My concern is just the time frame on it. And if you can, I don't know
Yeah,
how
I'm
that'll
not
work.
sure
Or how you,
if building already issued a permit. Okay.
Emergency repair.
Right, so you could progress to a certain extent with that, but you need the rest of this to catch up.
right.
Which
And
is, today's hearing's important.
absolutely.
But for the matter of the landscaping, the finish, the color, those things you were showing me, that's really a different board. It's called the Single Family Design Board. And I think the project's already been to them once, but it'll need to go
right.
back to them for their final action. And what we're saying, in order to get a quick, good final action, a detail of this section across, from narrowest to widened,
Okay.
and the specific type of plants that just continue to do what you started. But that board will be the one that finally approves it. My action is based on faith that will happen, because that's not really my
Okay. And I'm just
expertise.
trying to learn as I go along. so
I'm
thank
just
you.
trying to figure out a little bit more fact than faith, that I really feel that it is sufficient area and that your client working with that board has a good chance at covering this large wall.
Right.
Because otherwise I have a little bit of a concern about this height and length of the wall. However, in examining other properties in the area, Riviera is filled with walls of
Right.
all kinds of different size, heights, materials. But a big concrete wall is the least
Absolutely.
attractive one of the types we see. So I want to make sure it's appropriately screened.
Okay.
So,
And just, I'm trying to, this is the next board that I would go to?
yes. Yeah.
Because I think they've already put me on this. So,
Oh, you might be on next Monday?
right.
Good.
Okay.
Good. You just need to bring more detailed
Okay, so if I
landscape
can get
information.
together what you're asking for and bring it to this,
Yes.
then that keeps this ball
Yeah.
rolling. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Okay.
Thank you very
Did
much.
I open the public hearing? Is anyone here for 108 Loma Media? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Okay, so the finding is providing a solution to the existing landside situation and that it meets the purpose and intent of the ordinance by neither creating a visual obstruction or blocking the visibility of the residents from the right-of-way. I think I want to modify that language a little bit. Let's see. Because I don't think that the purpose and intent of the reduced or the maximum 8 feet height in the front yard is related to obstructing views from driveways, because that's the different standard. That's the 3.5 feet within 20 feet and 10 feet on either side, and that's not even really the one we're talking about. And I really am a little bit concerned about the views. So meets the purpose intent of the ordinance. I would say to maintain I think the purpose of the ordinance is to maintain a stable condition of private property without impacting the safety of the adjacent public street. To me, that's one of the biggest concerns, that this could just all fall down on the street.
Exactly. That's our concern as well.
And then, period, and then say subject to a thorough review of landscape screening by the single-family design board. Okay, so this isn't an approval.
Okay. And can I add just,
Okay.
I was just looking through the pictures. This gives you a little bit better idea where this is our bench here with the 4 foot.
The lower bench.
The lower
Right.
bench, exactly, I'm sorry. And then you can see how it gets to the 3 foot.
Yeah.
So it just narrows as it goes back. So that is our width in the middle.
Right.
Does the same, and then you can see better here because it's taken on the plane. If you put a vertical wall here, that's what we're going to end up with.
Well, it'll become a little narrower.
9 inches is the width of
Okay.
the wall.
Okay.
And we could even slightly dig into the bottom of the shale. Which
Well, I was thinking here that you might actually end up getting a tree or two, too.
would be more happy. There's citrus up there. This is my mother, but I'll take her word for it. She said the existing citrus up there wasn't
Okay.
doing very well, wasn't getting enough light. There is olive, there is palms, there are other trees, and we're trying
Something
to...
like an olive that doesn't need, you also don't want to probably introduce a lot of watering.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of what she was saying, was follow some of the, quote, xeriscape stuff
Yeah.
that was already existing.
Good.
Okay.
Okay, so that's an approval of the modification as requested and conditioned for the review by the single-family board, which you had to do anyway.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
Do you want any of these other pictures, or?
Do you keep these usually?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Great.
So this action is appealable within 10 calendar days to the Planning Commission. Also, the Planning Commission does an oversight review of it. So I think you did turn in some additional plans today,
Yeah.
right?
This one.
This
here.
one and then the one with the plant.
Because you're not approving a particular height, correct? Because with the areas where the wall is separated from another wall less than 5 feet, it would be an accumulative total.
Right, so I'm just going to say approve a modification of a wall in excess of 8 feet in height as required for the engineering design.
Perfect. Thank you.
I think you have,
I had the other sheets already. These are
I think the only, okay. So
two.
you, what,
One of
because
one,
one didn't
two
change.
of two.
Yeah.
One of one, two of
Well,
two.
this is the one the surveyor did, so this is actually sort of on its own.
Okay.
And this would be one of two with the plot line and everything.
Oh. Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I've got the file over here, Rox. With all this stuff. Huh?
Maybe when we go to ABR, we'll talk about coloring the stucco.
Right, they would do the color also. So when you go to that board, that's when you show them the color of the concrete also.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
I didn't decide that, okay? They'll pick the color.
Right, and we're amenable to any color
Okay.
with the stucco. And just as a last question, in lieu of stucco, which is fine, but obviously our intent is to just have it completely covered with landscaping so nobody ever sees the wall. Would a concrete stain also be amenable?
That, they would be the people to answer that. I don't have a problem with that, but,
Thank you.
okay, thanks. Paul Westbury wrote a letter as well. It's already done, let it be. Her comment.
I did, we handed out the other 20 letters within the area.
Oh.
I got 3 callbacks on that. Once I showed them what we were doing, they were all fine with it. And I've talked to Tim Immel, who's at 120 Lowell Media, literally right next door, and he is all in favor of the project. Everyone's more concerned about safety.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, the next and last item on our agenda is, thank you. I can bring it in later if you want, or you can just take it. Okay. 810 Bond Avenue. Hi. Okay, we'll begin with a brief report from Kathleen Kennedy.
Okay, this is a proposal for 810 Bond Avenue and 516 North Nopal Street. Here's the project site. Here's Bond Avenue, Nopal Street here, sort of in the corner. It's a proposal for a condominium conversion. There's an existing 3 apartments and 1 commercial unit on it's a mixed-use development, 4 stories on this lot. We're requesting a condominium conversion. No changes are being requested at all for this project, and no modifications are being requested. The existing 3 apartments consist of a one-bedroom apartment, 1 2-bedroom apartment, and 1 3-bedroom apartment. The commercial portion consists of, on the first floor and partially on the second floor, a total of 3,421 square feet. There exists 7 parking spaces. There are 2 that are enclosed, 1 for each of the apartments. There's also an uncovered parking space for the other apartment, and then 5 other open parking spaces for the commercial during the day and for guest parking in the evening. Like I said, no changes are being requested as part of this project. The project mixed-use development received a certificate of occupancy just a year ago in April, and now they're requesting conversion to condominiums. The project meets all the physical standards for condo conversions and also for new residential condominium projects. It meets the parking requirement for mixed-use development. It would normally require 6 parking spaces, 2 for each residential unit, but because the residential portion is less than the commercial, it does qualify for the 50% reduction. Therefore, there's only 3 residential parking spaces included. They did go to ABR back in January and received positive comments. When they go back there next time, they've requested some photographs showing the existing landscaping along the frontage. Also, some wayfinding signs to be put up to easily locate the residential units. As I said, they meet all the requirements for new residential condominiums. That includes private open yard area, open space area, separate utilities, parking, laundry facilities as well. The request is for a tentative subdivision map to allow the 4 condominium units, 3 apartments and 1 commercial, and a condo conversion permit. The staff recommends approval of the project, subject to the findings and conditions in the staff report.
Thank you. This morning I had a question that I posed to Jan, and it doesn't sound like she got the question to you. No. Okay. I had a question about whether or not, and I mentioned this briefly to the the applicant on the site, whether or not the new condominium standards for parking are being met. In the zoning ordinance, the new condominium requirement for parking is that if a covered parking space is provided, one must be provided for each unit. So there are 3 residential condominiums, and none of the parking spaces were really identified to me as to which ones are for the condominiums. I kind of made the assumption that this would be one of the condominium spaces and this would be another condominium space.
That's correct.
They're labeled on the plans, but
Okay.
on site,
So
I'm
where
not sure
is
if they
the
are.
3rd covered space?
They're labeled here, I think 1P1 is the, represents.
The question was covered.
Okay.
Was your question?
Yeah,
And we
excuse
have-
me, sir.
Oh,
I'm asking the staff first. If I'm not satisfied with their answer or you want to add, I'll turn to the applicant. So, my understanding is that the requirement is 1 covered per condominium. So,
Well,
you're saying,
saying-
what was your
my
understanding?
understanding is it's mixed use and covered is not required. That if covered parking is provided for condominiums, then they need to be reserved for those particular units, but not that every condominium
Okay.
requires.
Susie, do you have this section?
I was aware that maybe this would come up and to bring a
okay.
number of areas related to parking, but I think we're mostly focused on the mixed-use development, in any mixed-use development. That it
Okay, I'm aware of that. That's why there's 1 parking space required for each one. One of the things that concerns me most is the conversion, the fact that this was developed and permitted recently without condominium standards. And the question of whether or not this is an appropriate project to be converted to condominium. So,
The section is right here, 28.90.100.G3E, and it says, when the parking referred to in subsection 28, in the subsection above, is provided for condominium, community apartment, or stock cooperative, at least 1 parking space that is in a garage or carport shall be allotted to each residential unit.
so that was my understanding, that to meet the condominium requirement, which is a significant, that's the main reason that we're here today, is to determine whether or not this meets the new condominium requirements and whether or not it would be approved as a conversion. I agree, mixed use would reduce it to 1 per unit. So that part's fine. So the question was the new condominium standard of this 1 covered for each. And I saw 2, and there are 3 dwelling units. So to me, that posed a question of whether or not it does comply with the new condominium standards.
I don't see that this is requiring a covered for each. I don't think of it that way.
Okay.
There is another section in the parking ordinance. It's 2890-100.H, which talks about mixed-use developments, and it says, in any mixed-use development where residential uses occupy 50% of the, up to 50% of the development, residential parking requirements may be reduced by 50%, and covered parking will not be required, although it will be encouraged. So that, in my view, supersedes the covered parking requirement. That's a specific incentive for mixed-use development. And when you look at Chapter 27, the physical standards for the condominiums, it just says that you have to meet the requirements of the parking ordinance, Chapter 2890.100. So I believe that the mixed-use incentive supersedes the covered parking requirement for condominiums.
Okay. It says multiple residential unit. Okay, so I guess presumably that is in a project that is all residential. This one that I'm reading with the covered parking space.
Yes, that's correct. That's 28100
Also 100.
G.
G, right.
Right. So G talks about all as all residential. Mixed use gives you some additional incentives if you have mixed use.
I see. Okay, good. Then the other question that I think was probably more for the applicant when you make your presentation. My observation was that the site wasn't really improved, its parking lot, or being used the way it's shown on the plans. Also then, I just have some questions about the condominium conversion standards in terms of the mix of use of the property with the auto shop and the appropriateness of condominium development, residential condominiums. So if you want to address both of those in your presentation of the project.
Okay,
Thank
I'll
you.
do the best I can. My name is Steve Oroz, Oroz Engineering Group, the applicant representative. The first part I'd like to identify is that in section 2890-100H, under mixed-use developments, the opening for this says residential uses. Parking spaces shall be provided in accordance with subsection 2890-100.G, subject to the following exceptions. And that following exception is that mixed use up to 50%, the reduction of the required parking, and the relief from covered parking being required. So it's referring back to the parking standards. So that is why we're here on that aspect. So
There are two covered parking proposed.
So it's encouraged, and those two are for the condominium. They're designated for the condominiums.
One for each, and
Yeah.
that'll be sold with it?
Yes. I believe this one here is for the two-bedroom unit, and this one is for the three-bedroom unit.
And then this is the one identified?
For the one-bedroom.
Okay.
Correct. I think the next question you had was about the usage of the parking. The parking is striped, is planned to be striped for the 3 spaces. Because there's less than 10 spaces, there's not really a requirement to mark the handicap stall as long as there's space provided for it. So that's, and all the parking was reviewed, and there were no exceptions by the engineering department. There is 3 designated residential parking spaces, which meets the residential parking requirement. Also, there's 4 spaces for the commercial use, the auto repair, which is consistent with the zoning requirements for that. And then the question was about the appropriateness of the condominium use combined with the automobile use. Was that another point? Again, it's if there's no guidance or restrictions in the codes that would prohibit that. The condos are for sale, and the auto repair business is very apparent to a buyer. So if a person is okay with the automobile use, they may be interested in purchasing or not, but that would be up to the individual buyer. And with the business being closed 3 days a week, they're not open Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. There's 3 days where it's quieter than the normal business day. So if there's any other questions, or I could expand on some of those if you need to, but that's the summary of the project.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'll open and close the public hearing. There's no one in the room in the general public. Would you like to make any comments in addition?
No.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
You answered all your questions.
Okay.
And this is Peter Krols, the property owner.
We met yesterday.
The staff report included a summary of the design review, the recent design review. And of course, it's been approved, permitted, and constructed. I am just struggling a little bit. I don't know that the board, when they reviewed the original design of the project, if they had understood at that time that it was going to be a condominium project and mixed use with this land use that, to me, is not the most compatible with residential. From my point of view, a rental situation, when someone sees that they're living in a mixed-use rental situation, the term of the rent could be 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. It's not a major investment and where people tend to live in a condominium setting for a much longer period of time. I'm just really struggling to find that, oh, this is what we intended, to have mixed-use condominium home ownership above a garage, where the parking for the garage is, adequate space for the equal number of cars that are in the garage. That's fine. I don't question that you comply with that from a zoning standpoint. I'm questioning the appropriateness of these mix of uses in a condominium development. I just feel like there's quite a gap for me to go from a per code standard construction project to the condominium. And I don't know if the staff did discuss that a lot, or...
Not very much, but I do know that...
Your microphone's in your jacket. It's on the inside, yeah.
There we go. That helps, that helps. Okay, thanks. I do know that when they went through the process, it was the engine company. It's been there a long time. So when they proposed the apartments, it was with the understanding that that was the use that was going to be there. With apartments. So that sort of conflicting residential and auto repair was out there in the open all along. But
for apartments.
For condominiums, we didn't really discuss that very much. I mean, it was part of the project, but it wasn't something that we felt that would be a reason to not recommend approval. Although we do know that for some people that may be something that they wouldn't want to purchase because of that.
Well, I guess I'm convinced that it meets the standards because of the parking. That was one question. Again, there is that specific exemption and it overrides the other, but back to what the other one was about is that if you have a condominium development, you should have one covered parking space for each one. I mean, maybe you aren't technically required in order to get your building permit for this project that you had to have one covered because it's a mixed-use project. But are the amenities appropriate? Can I make this finding that the project should be converted to condominiums? So one of the units doesn't even get the covered parking space. I presume the inside, the units have all the adequate storage, the 300 cubic feet?
Yes, that's correct.
Want to look inside?
Okay, we can do that on the plans.
If you would like, I can walk you through where
they meet all the other requirements. Double check that.
We went through that with the storage requirements, the private open space. All the condominium requirements are met. There are no exceptions at all being requested. Parking, storage, unit size.
So then it's pretty clear to me that this is a two-step process by which you worked it out with the ABR, and now all I'm supposed to do is approve it as is, a done deal. Whereas if you had come in and proposed it as a condominium that you fully designed to meet, intentionally made sure you met it, now I'm supposed to just approve it. I'm not inclined to do that. I really cannot say that this would be the approach to designing a mixed-use condominium project with this land use and in this design. I'm not prepared to make the findings for the condominium conversion. So
may I ask you what you're basing it on? What code are we violating?
I cannot make the finding that the overall design, including project amenities and physical condition of the conversion, will result in a project which is aesthetically attractive, safe, and a quality construction for a condominium conversion.
Even though the ABR has reviewed
I'm
it?
making my independent decision.
Okay.
Again, you already met the ABR standard. This is a separate standard.
But in your discussion, you mentioned aesthetics and physical standards that we meet.
I don't think that the project amenities, including the parking design for the condominiums and the mix of land uses is an appropriate physical condition for a condominium project. So I cannot make the required finding number 4 under a condominium conversion.
And the only thing
And-
you're basing on is your feeling of automotive and condominium.
Yes, the mix of land uses for a purchasing condominium, which is supposed to be of
If you could
a
show me
different
in the
quality.
land use ordinance where you can make that finding, I'd be glad to look at that.
It's on your staff report, finding number 4, B4.
No, I know that's the finding, but if you can show me in your zoning ordinance where the automotive use and condominium use is not a compatible mix for mixed-use condominiums.
I don't know if it exactly says that in the zoning ordinance. This is a discretionary hearing where I'm asked to make this finding. Whether or not the zoning ordinance says it or doesn't say it, because it doesn't say it either emphatically that it is, you're asking me to show you where it says that it is not.
Yeah.
You can't show me where it says that it is.
Within the industrial land use or zone that we are in, it shows residential uses are compatible.
But this is a particular design for which the overall design of the project, including the project amenities and physical condition of the site, I cannot make that finding. So,
Can I ask
yes.
just one question? I know about the mixed use part, but as far as parking, if they were to be able to have one of these as covered parking, that would meet
The other
one part
the
of
other
it, but
issue I have about the condominium is this project was approved as this particular land use with a particular parking situation. Any future conversion of the land use is really going to present an additional challenge to parking for the space, the commercial space, because the amount of square footage involved and all of that. Now we're in a mixed-use ownership association where there could be a future change in the land use. To me, this is not a compatible mixed-use, well-designed condominium project. I think it's fine for what it is. You have a garage and you have rental units. You have one owner. There could be changes over time. To me, this is not what the Subdivision Map Act and the cities of Santa Barbara's condominium conversion standards are.
Sound community planning finding too for tentative map.
I didn't see the sound community planning finding.
Tentative map.
So, anyway, I'm sorry. I know this isn't the outcome that you were looking for. It may be that if you're unsatisfied with this decision, it is appealable to the Planning Commission.
We'd like that form.
Yeah. So this is a denial of the project as submitted today. All decisions of the staff hearing officer are appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 calendar days, or the Planning Commission could suspend, but those are really separate considerations. So you'll want to follow up later with your case planner to talk about the appeal process. That's your concern.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
We did receive one letter.
Okay, a letter. We got a letter. Did the applicant get one of these?
Yes.
Okay. All right. With that, I'll adjourn.